Professor Layton is one of those games where the presentation is just as important as the gameplay itself, and the music is a huge part of what makes the series so lovable. Each game's soundtrack welcomes you into its world with a unique style that manages to capture the spirit of top hat-wearing gentlemanship so naturally that you never once even question why puzzle solving is all of a sudden an English gentleman thing. The sound of the Layton games has been one of the series' defining features. Now, pop quiz. Do you know which Professor Layton game this theme that's been playing is from? Any guesses? The correct answer is no, you don't know, because I wrote it. By analyzing the various Layton themes, picking out the consistent compositional elements, and putting those elements together into something new, I think I managed to write a theme that's noticeably Layton-esque. And you could do it too. What are the elements that make up the Layton sound? How do you put them together to make a Professor Layton theme? A gentleman always shares his insights. Every Professor Layton main theme follows the same structure. First, set the mood with a subdued intro. Then bring in a solo violin melody over top that elaborates on this established mood. And then build up the intensity of the arrangement, leading into a hook. The hook then changes the vibe from the subdued intro into something closer to a J-pop song. Afterwards, the music breaks back down into a simmer. And then builds up again with repeated rhythmic figures playing an extended crescendo into huge hits that end the piece. This structure is crucial to Professor Layton themes, but the most important aspect is to capture the Professor Layton vibe. This vibe has to be pensive and subdued, creating an atmosphere that washes over the whole piece. The way this is achieved is through the sound of the second over top of a minor chord. For an example, we need look no further than the very first notes of the Professor's main theme, which sees the piano plunking out this root second third cluster in C minor, while the piano's left hand and a bassoon give us a rhythmic rising fifth line underneath. We've immediately set the mysterious mood here. There's no jumping around to other chords, we're just sitting on one minor chord and letting the crunch of the second against the flat third fill us with intrigue. The simple scalar counterline underneath helps give a little more motion without having to leave this opening chord. Every theme starts with a solo instrument establishing this same kind of atmosphere, with contemplative figures emphasizing the second over a minor chord. For Professor Layton and the Miracle Mask, this instrument is a classical guitar, letting a beautiful spread-voiced E minor 9 chord ring out. The way the ninth clashes against the flat third is just too tasty. Most Layton main themes feature this kind of guitar part, but usually it's hidden behind the rest of the arrangement. Miracle Mask puts it front and center. The Professor Layton and the Unwound Future theme centers its orchestration around a string quintet, and sets this mood by having a solo cello melody backed by an A minor add 2 chord in the strings. Professor Layton and the Diabolical Box opens with this piano line that walks up and down the B minor scale, leaping down to these lower B minor chord tones in between to effortlessly create a brooding atmosphere. Moving through these examples, you'll notice that the Layton series uses a strictly limited palette of instrumental colors. The main theme of each game is recorded live by a band credited as the Layton Grand Caravan Orchestra, featuring solo violin and accordion as the main lead instruments, a rhythm section of piano, acoustic guitar, upright bass, drums, and various percussion instruments like cajon or shaker, and then a broader variety of extra orchestral instruments that may or may not be used as you look from game to game, like a string section, bassoon, clarinet, etc. Each of the game's main themes use the same instrumental colors, but let's get back to these pieces' structure. In each piece, the quiet, moody intro continues on as a solo violin melody comes in over top. The melody's job is to elaborate on the mood set by the intro using colorful, non-chord tones, especially the second, to lend a depth and mystery to the music. In Professor Layton's theme, the violin melody that enters reinforces the sound of the intro by coming in on the second of the chord at the start of each phrase and walking up to the fourth. Professor Layton and the Last Spectre's theme sits on the second of the key and stays there as the chords descend from the tonic A minor through an Andalusian cadence, which is a pretentious name for a 1, flat 7, flat 6, 5 progression. Not only do we get the sound of the second over our tonic A minor chord, but we get to see how this note changes in color as the chords change underneath it. Miracle Mask unashamedly grabs the second and doesn't let it go. The Diabolical Box theme uses a solo cello melody, its low range complementing the higher range of the piano ostinato over top. This one doesn't feature the second in the melody instead uses the Dorian raised sixth to lighten up the atmosphere. Unwound Futures melody opens with and returns to a strong second over its tonic A minor. These sections are meant to let you sit in the atmosphere created by the intro vamp, to really establish the latent sound and set the stage for the mystery at hand. After this comes an 8-bar section meant to build up intensity. The accordion usually takes the lead at this point with a much busier melody than what we'd previously heard, and the bass and percussion sneak in here too. See, the middle of each tune goes into a more upbeat, groovier section, and these 8-bar transitions are meant to bridge the gap between the subdued introduction and the livelier section that follows. Professor Layton's theme brings in the accordion with a much busier, syncopated line, though one that still focuses on the second of the key. The upright bass and percussion gradually sneak in underneath to aid in the crescendo. In the Diabolical Box, this is where the acoustic guitar comes in with a syncopated chord part, along with the upright bass and some light shaker. The accordion comes in on top, first with held melody notes and then with this bouncy syncopated figure that does a brilliant job building up momentum moving into the big hook. The Unwound Future theme maintains its focus on string ensemble, but moves from typical string quintet writing into something more rhythmic. double bass comes in with an offbeat focused line, and the strings bounce on these staccato A minor add 2 chords. The melody on top once again is completely obsessed with the second of our tonic chord. Introducing more harmonic motion and, most importantly, becoming more rhythmically active facilitates the gradual build from the opening's mysterious atmosphere into the more lively middle section. This middle section is the hook of each theme, the meat of the piece, and this is where a delicate touch is required. See, it's at this point that we break away from mysterious mood building and the piece opens up. We leave behind the minor add 2 sound and move into an actual chord progression with more movement. We almost always start off with the flat 6 chord, which feels like a big release after being centered on our tonic minor chord for so long. We see this in Professor Layton's theme. This is a perfect example of the balance these themes have to strike. The arrangement must have a vaguely Latin flavor, but underneath the Latin aesthetic, the writing is really that of a J-pop song. Going through exactly what makes up this style of writing could be its own video, but mostly it means the melody has to be written with syncopated, dancey rhythms, the chord progression moves quickly and uses upper extensions, like sevenths, on every chord, but the chord progression mostly stays inside of the key with simple functional harmonic moves. Match this style of melody and harmony to a Latin-infused groove, and we have our hook section. For Professor Layton's theme, if you imagine this piece being played by a hippily dressed collection of Japanese 20-year-olds, it makes perfect sense, but the bass and drums are giving more of a calypso feel underneath. I found when writing my fake Layton tune that it was easy to lean too heavy into the Latin feel and lose the Layton sound. The skeleton has got to be J-pop, just with a slight Latin tinge. Oh, I also have to mention the other absolutely crucial element of these themes. The violin and accordion have to trade off the melody. Each phrase dovetails together, the one instrument undercutting the other by running up a scale to get to the start of the next phrase. We see this in Miracle Mask's hook. We start on C major 7, the flat 6 of the key again, and move through a chord progression that sounds very J-pop in contrast of the ocean of E minor that opened up the piece. This one uses a little mode mixture, inserting this A half diminished chord here to give us a surprise resolution to G major rather than E minor. These kinds of secondary resolutions inside of a key are also a big part of the sound of J-pop music. As Ran Legacy's main section starts with a violin melody and then trades off with the accordion, once again starting on the flat 6 of the key and once again using a very J-pop inspired approach to harmony and melody. Even Unwound Future's string-focused arrangement caves and lets the accordion do the talking for this part of the track, once again cutting off the end of the violin melody with a run up the scale into the section. After the hook, each piece brings the intensity back down to a simmer, usually returning to a static minor chord, though not exactly the figure that opened up the piece. Sometimes an element of the main groove section is retained, a shaker hinting at a Latin feel, or chords that move around a little more than before. Azran Legacy's main hook section is probably the most obviously J-pop inspired of the series, and after this climactic crazy accordion line brings it to a head, the breakdown returns to the calm acoustic guitar vamp that opened up the piece. Only now, rather than just sitting on a straight C minor chord, the bass line descends chromatically underneath, and the melody above continues some of the ideas from the previous section. Unwound Future moves from its hook section into a contrapuntal string quartet breakdown, continuing the string-focused theme of the piece. We start down low with just cello and viola, and then violins layer in over top and build up into another climax. Layton's theme brings back the iconic piano and bassoon figure that opened up the piece, but this time with a creepy, low violin line on top. The use of the raised seventh, these B naturals, as well as this chromatic sliding from the fifth to the sharp fourth to the natural fourth, adds a suspicious air to the piece. The Last Spectre brings in a lush string section playing these gorgeous extended chords, which feels like you just got hit in the face with a tidal wave after the violin and accordion shredding that leads up to it. It's after these breakdown sections that each piece chooses one of two paths to go down. Either they enter into a new vamping figure that sits on the tonic minor chord and gradually builds up into a series of big climactic final hits, or they move into shredding solos traded between some combination of violin, accordion, piano, and guitar that build up into a series of big climactic final hits. I much prefer the shredding personally, but either way we're getting to some big climactic final hits at the end. Miracle Mask forgoes the soloing for a slow build-up, culminating in these great D over E chords to end the piece. Remember the repeated rhythm that the music used to build up towards the end there, because it's about to feel very familiar. The Last Spectre theme ends with traded solos between the accordion, piano, and violin, and then ends with an extended classical guitar solo that is so sick it makes me want to puke. Notice the same rhythm used as an accompaniment figure underneath. The unwound future theme ends with the same rhythmic accompaniment, underscoring trading, accordion, piano, and violin solos, leading into a violin melody that brings the piece to a huge finish. Professor Layton's theme is one that doesn't use the same dotted eighth rhythm in the accompaniment, instead emphasizing the 2/8 note rhythm that the piano left hand and bassoon part use to start the piece. The way these big eighth note chords punctuate the subdued cello and bassoon line feels so dramatic. A gentleman always delivers a satisfying ending. Sorry. Each theme takes their own liberties with this form, but the general roadmap of setting the mood, building into a big, exciting hook, breaking the music back down, and then bringing the piece through a slow crescendo into a climactic finish is shockingly consistent across each of these games' main themes. So, using this form and the various elements shared between all of this music, you too can build yourself a fake Professor Layton theme. I had a lot of fun doing it, and I'm sure you will too. I cannot thank enough the musicians who contributed to my fake Layton tune: Casey Kurtz on guitar, Eli Bishop on violin, and Andy Rue mixing it. I ended up transcribing so much more Professor Layton music than I had time to show here, but if you head over to my Patreon and donate $5 or more, you can have access to all of those full transcriptions as well as every other transcription I've ever made for this channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.